Recently, I've enjoyed listening to primary engineers' interviews. In particular, Mo Taher talking about his work at Heathrow Airport. Primary engineer kindly agreed that I can use some sections of his interviews to think about why he's such an effective communicator. In this first clip, Mo's asked what he does for his job. This sounds like a really easy question, but the risk is that we just launch information a little bit like a medieval catapult. Another way to think about this is like junk mail or a spam email. Although a message has got out, it's done without really thinking about the particular audience, and they might be received with somebody not reading it, not opening the message. They don't really care about it necessarily. Some might, but others won't. And it's the same way when we have an audience, we have people listening to what we're saying, but unless they have an interest or see how it's relevant to them, we can't make them care about what we're talking about. So it's really important to try to communicate with a specific audience in front of us. In this case, the audience would have been children and young people, potentially between the ages of 3 and 19 years, who were involved in this competition. If you were an engineer, what would you do? And so we really want to think about how to draw them into, starting in their world, draw them into what we want to communicate. And I think of that as a bit like fishing. You think if you've got the line and you've got the bait, and you need to draw the fish with the bait, draw them towards you to catch them. And in the same way, we need to start in our audience's world, think about what matters to them, what they're interested in, and use that to draw them into the message that we're trying to get across. So let's look at this section and see how Mo does this effectively.
Who I am and what I do. You might be able to tell from the words on my shirt. It might be flipped around though, but some of you may be able to read it. I work at Heathrow Airport. Now, Heathrow Airport is the busiest, biggest airport in the UK. And I'm an engineer and I actually look after not the planes, but everything else. And today we're going to be talking about what that means. So, my actual role, my title, is the systems specialist for the aerodrome. So, those are three really complicated words they decided to put together into one sentence, and it's really hard to understand. So, let me explain to you what actually I do. Imagine when you're at the airport and you are about to get on the plane. But before you get on the plane, before you scan your pass, you walk down that long square pipe to actually get on the plane, you look out of the window, out the glass, and you see lots of stuff happening. You see the plane is parked up in front of you. You also see maybe some other planes that are moving around the airport. You see the runways and you see all this stuff that's happening outside the terminal building. Now, when outside the terminal building, there's lots of equipment and there's lots of different systems that are necessary to make sure that this plane, number one, knows where it's going. Number two, it knows how to park itself at the gate. Number three, once it's at the gate and it's stationary and it's stopped at the gate, actually it has electricity. So what my job is I look after all of the equipment that means that a plane like this can come to the airport, move around, park up automatically. We actually have like laser guided machines that use lasers to guide the planes, to tell them where to park. Um, and then even up in the control tower, all of the systems in there, all of that stuff that means that a plane like this can travel to the airport and be safe and sound. Everyone can go on holiday and enjoy your beaches and get your tan. I make sure that happens here at Heathrow Airport.
In this next clip, Mo's asked how many planes take off and land in Heathrow each day. He could have just given the information, given the number, 1,250 planes. However, he goes into more detail to explain that number to help people to understand what it really means.
So we've now got a question from Jessica in Mrs. Emerson's class, and Jessica would like to know how many planes come into the airport a day.
So if we were to add all the planes taking off and all the planes coming down in one day, and these are numbers are before COVID, because COVID stopped a lot of things, right? Before COVID, we had 1,250 planes coming in and taking off per day. What
Wow.
does that mean? That means that every 45 seconds, there was a plane either landing or taking off. We have two runways at Heathrow Airport. We have the northern runway and we have the southern runway. So always, at all times, there's planes landing on one of them and taking off on the other one. And every 45 seconds, there is a plane landing and a plane taking off throughout the whole day.
So we've talked about the importance of communicating with your audience. And one part of this is making sure that the words and the concepts that you use will be easily understood. So part of this is thinking about what words and concepts they will understand. And then also thinking about what ones they need. So that might help you to think what to explain and what to not include at all. When you've decided what words you want to include but they might not understand, is then the question of how do you explain it or how do you introduce them. Sometimes this can be done directly. For example, in this next extract, Mo's answering a question about how fast a plane can fly, and he explains the concept of the speed of sound and faster than the speed of sound. So let's look at how he explains this, but does it in a way that's appropriate for his audience.
And Declan would like to know, how fast can a plane go?
Ooh, so that's a really good question. So to be honest with you, a plane can almost go as fast as you want. It depends on which type of plane. So you can have
Ah,
really, really small planes with only one little tiny engine at the front, and they'll maybe do 100 miles an hour. But then you have the big jets, which are like this, like the one that you might go on holiday. And a plane like that will do a lot faster. Now, I can't tell you the number off the top of my head, to be honest with you, because each plane is different. But if we go to the extreme end of these, then we're looking at planes like the Concorde. And the Concorde, you might know what the Concorde is, you might not know what the Concorde is, but imagine this, right? The Concorde could travel faster than sound travels. And you're probably confused. You're like, huh? Sound? But sound doesn't take time to travel. If you've ever been to a cave and you've seen echo, right? And
yeah.
when you say echo, and then what happens is the sound leaves your mouth, it bounces off a wall, and then it comes back to you. And the time between you saying echo and then the time where that sound comes back, that's the speed of sound. So sound, when you're sat next to somebody, it feels like they're right there. It feels like there is no sound, there is no speed of sound. But actually, sound takes time to move through the air. We have planes that travel faster than the speed of sound. And
Wow.
the military planes, not the ones that we can get on, the military planes, they can travel like two, three, four, 5 times the speed of sound. They can get really fast. And that's when we start talking like they're on the edge of space at that point. They're really high up and they're going really fast.
So in that clip, Mo directly explains the concept. However, we don't want to do that all the time, because if we do it too often, it can sound like we're lecturing somebody, and nobody likes that. So in other places, he recasts what he's saying. For example, at one point in the interview, he says about the planes are stationary, they're not moving. So he's recasted stationary, explained that it means not moving, but he hasn't done this by giving a lengthy definition or even drawing attention to the explanation. It's just dropped in there to provide clarification if needed, but not making a big fuss about it. Images and examples can be a really important way to help your audience to understand, remember, and visualize what it is you're trying to communicate.
Actually, Mo, to start. What do you love about your job?
What I love about my job is when I get to go outside in outside the terminal and just the buzz of all the things that are happening. You see, an airport, it's like a domino set. Or you might be thinking, what do you mean like a domino set? Whoever's played dominoes at home might know this, right? You'll have all these different dominoes stacked up, right? And then maybe like your younger brother or sister will come and they'll want to play with, like they want to touch the dominoes. Now, imagine if all of these dominoes that are standing up are different pieces of equipment and different things that are happening at the airport. If one of these things falls over and stops working, it doesn't just affect itself. That will affect instantly something else, which will affect something else, which will affect something else, which ultimately could mean that you can't fly. So what I love about the airport is that everything depends on each other. So I'll give you an example, okay? Let's say we're in the baggage system. In the baggage system, one of our X-ray machines stops working, okay? Now let's say two of our X-ray machines stop working, and then three. And if the X-ray machines stop working, what that means is that we can't get the bags through the X-ray machine and we can't put them on the flight. What that then means that all the bags that are coming in this conveyor belt, they all have to stop. And if you go back far enough, that means that the people upstairs at the check-in desks can't put any more bags in the system. And if they can't put any more bags in the system, that means that you, as a passenger who's just arrived to the airport wanting to put your bags in the system, they say, sorry, we can't accept your bags, which means that you're going to start getting worried and saying, oh my God, like, how am I going to get to my flight? Am I do this? And then we have to instantly try something else and try something else. Everything that might go wrong in an airport has a direct impact on another thing, which will impact another thing, which will impact another thing, and then it might affect you going on the plane and flying out. So what I love about the airport is that it's really complicated. And I know that sounds weird, but because it's so complicated, it's so important that the thing that you're looking after works properly. Because if it doesn't work properly, then it'll have an impact on so many other things. And that's a crucial part.
So we've looked at some of the features of effective communication. The first thing is really about thinking about who your audience is and making sure you start in their world and using that to frame your communication. As part of communication, it's important to make numbers meaningful and use relevant examples and images. Obviously, the actual language, the terms and the concepts we use are important, and we need to think about what to include, what to miss out, and also how to include them, where to give definitions or longer explanations, and when to simply recast them. I've just looked at little extracts so far, but I would really recommend watching the whole video. An important thing is to have a clear take-home message. And even though this was an interview where different questions were being asked, if you watch the whole video, I would say that Mo has a clear overall message. And I'd also suggest looking at his pace, pausing and gestures. We can be really nervous about having pauses, thinking it shows hesitation. However, pausing in the right place is actually really important to help our audience understand us. If you think about a piece of writing, we have space, space between each word, we have commas, we have full stops, we have semicolons. We have things to help us break up and chunk that language, and that's really important in speaking too. If you're an engineer and would be interested in getting involved in supporting the competition, then contact engineers@primaryengineer.com. This video is also available on the English for Engineers YouTube channel, which has videos to support mainly engineering students studying at university by looking at some of the skills for writing and speaking.